Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee, and I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold and copper exploration and development today. We will hear from Marshall Koval, President and CEO of Lumina Gold. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine print. During this Lumina Gold webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined in the Lumina corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, luminagold.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Lumina Gold. So we have Lumina Gold presenting today, the company which is led by an experienced management team with strong financial backing with Ross Beatty and the Lumina Group, is focused on advancing its Cangrejos project in Ecuador, which hosts one of the largest undeveloped gold copper deposits globally. With that, I now turn it over to Marshall to update our audience on the company.
Thanks a lot, Timothy. Yeah, we're advancing the Cangrejos project in Ecuador. It's our sole asset in the company. Basically, we went into the country in 2014, acquired this. When we acquired the project, there was no resource on it. Fast forward to today, we've got 22 million ounces of gold and 2.6 billion pounds of copper in the resource categories. So I'll walk you through this. We've got the forward-looking statement here. Give you a second to look at that. So let me walk through some of the highlights of the Cangrejos project. It's the 26th largest primary gold deposit in all resource categories globally, and it's the largest primary gold deposit in Ecuador. We've got a reserve based on the PFS we completed last year of 11.6 million ounces of gold and 1.4 billion pounds of copper, and an indicated resource of 16 million ounces of gold and 2.2 billion pounds of copper, and then 3.7 million ounces of gold in that resource and in the inferred category, and 0.5 billion pounds of copper. So the feasibility study that we did that we're currently involved in right now is based on the PFS that we did in 2023, and the PFS results showed a large production profile, 371,000 ounces of gold a year of production and 41 million pounds of copper. If you kind of flip that into gold equivalent, that's 469,000 ounces of gold equivalent production a year, and quite a few years that it's well over 500,000. Long mine life, 26 years, basically low capex or low cash cost net of AISC, copper of $671 an ounce, and the $1,650 gold case, we got a $2.2 billion NPV at a 5.5% discount rate. If you go the 20% up case, it gives you about a 3.5 billion NPV. And if you look at today's spot price, it puts you over 4 billion. So a robust project with a lot of upside to gold. We put in a stream, a $3 million stream with Wheaton Precious Metals for 6% of the payable gold production. I'll walk you through that as we go forward here. Basically, looking at the corporate overview, we have 415 million shares issued and outstanding, fully diluted about 451 million. Basically, market cap of 229 million Canadian, about 13.6 million in US in cash at the end of December 2023. We're working on the feasibility study now. Trading range is 32 cents to 71 cents, 52-week average. Key shareholders, Ross Beatty at 27.7%, management and the board about 8.2%. So it gives us the Lumina Group about 35% of the shares. Ecuadorian entrepreneurial group, they're into all sorts of businesses. Apolitical group in Ecuador, they have 16.5%, and Route 1 out of San Francisco has 6.8%. We have research coverage, all buy recommendations by BMO, Haywood, and also Raymond James and Red Cloud. Just looking at Ecuador, today there's two major producing mines, Fruta del Norte and Mirador mine. Fruta is obviously a gold project and Mirador is copper. Two projects that are in the permitting stage right now that are moving forward, Curipamba and La Plata. Curipamba, we merged Luminex Resources, a sister company with them, with Adventus, and just recently Silver Corp has put in an offer to take over the Adventus. So the Curipamba project has a permit in place right now, and it's construction ready, basically. La Plata's in the permitting process. And then behind that, you've got Loma Larga, which should be moving forward here in the years to come. Below, you can see feasibility study projects in Cascabel, Cangrejos, which we're talking about today, and Condor, which was our project in Luminex. Ecuador has become a much more attractive investment arena. You look at the Fraser Institute, and they've showed steady progress. We've seen, since we've been in the country, improved regulatory and fiscal regime. And now you've got major gold players like Newmont and Barrick in the country, and you've got most of the copper players. So geologically rich area for future discovery. Kind of talk a little bit about our history at Cangrejos. This was discovered by Newmont, subsequent drilling programs by Odin Mining, our predecessor company. And then we, between 2014 and 2023, have drilled about 93,000 meters, which make up the resource in the reserve that we have. Newmont completed some metallurgical test work. We've done extensive work since then. And basically the PFS that was released in April of 2023, that were some of the numbers that I just ran you through. But right now we're fairly far into the feasibility study work. We've got a large metallurgical testing program ongoing. We've got a mine plan being produced. We did all the field work for geotech, pit slope design, metallurgy, and infill drilling to get a proven reserve once the feasibility study's done for the first 3 years of the project. So we're in good shape. We intend to have the feasibility study done at the end of the second quarter of 2025. Let me talk a little bit about the project. It's got power, port facility, road, water, low elevation, and no communities directly on the project. We're connected to the power grid. Mirador is shipping copper concentrates out of Puerto Boulevard. They truck it some 300 kilometers across the country. We sit about 40 kilometers from that port. Paved roads into the area, ample water, low elevation. The high wall of the pit's about 1,000 meters. And again, no communities to deal with directly on the deposit. Good social program, good relationship with the communities. That's kind of a key to our success to date. We get a lot of questions about the project. You know, it's a lower grade project, and so they talk about the grade quite a bit. It's 0.71 life of mine over the 27 years of gold equivalent. But if you look at it as a large porphyry deposit, it's more akin to a copper porphyry deposit. So if you look at it from a copper perspective, it's 0.46 copper equivalent. Recently built mines like Cobre de Panama, Mount Milligan, Red Chris have been done. So it fits into that scale of a project. It benefits from a low stripping ratio, about 1.26 to 1. Cheap power in Ecuador, about 7 cents per kilowatt hour. They're a diesel producer, low diesel. Proximity to the infrastructure, and then we've got economies of scale. We're starting at 40,000 tons per day in the feasibility study, moving to 80. The CapEx, we get questions about that. It's about 925 million CapEx for the initial capital in the PFS. That was 30,000 tons per day, going up to 40,000. It'll be a bit higher. We're working on the engineering on that as we speak. And you've had projects of this scale constructed in Ecuador, both Fruta and Mirador recently. Mirador just announced an expansion from 60,000 tons a day to 140,000 tons per day, and Fruta's been expanded a couple times. Just kind of looking at the deposits, you can see on the right the Cangrejos deposit. In the feasibility study, we're looking at mining Cangrejos out for the first roughly 14, 15 years, and then backfilling Gran Bestia once into production, part of the waste rock, into the Cangrejos pit. And then Gran Bestia will come in roughly in year 15. Gran Bestia has a lower stripping ratio than Cangrejos, sort of 0.5 to 1. And then Cangrejos is about 1.3, 1.4 to 1 over its mine life. Just looking here, you can see the red jagged line. That's the PFS mine plan pit. We constrained the pit at $1,100 gold, and then we used a $1,500 NSR cutoff grade in the pre-feasibility study. You can see that the resource does go below that. To go deeper into the Cangrejos pit, you'd have substantially larger or deeper pit with higher pit walls. But you can see on the left here is Gran Bestia, where you're basically taking off the top of a ridge. Gran Bestia is open to the northwest, so there's some more upside with potential drilling. But basically, it's real easy mining on the Gran Bestia deposit, and pretty much the same with Cangrejos. Looking at the probable reserves in the PFS, you've got 639 million tons of fresh rock. That's 96% of the material to be mined. We wasted the saprolite and sap rock in the PFS, so you take a double hit, you have to move it, and then you don't get a revenue. It runs about 0.7 grams per ton gold. In the feasibility study, we're going to stockpile some of that and try to put it into the flow sheet as well. You can see the average grade is 0.55 gold and 0.1 copper, and the contained metals in that mine plan is 11.56 million tons of gold and 1.42 million pounds of copper. PFS metallurgy, really good recoveries, 85% of the gold recovery and then 79% copper. Most of the gold is going to be in a gold copper concentrate, about 78% of that, and then there'll be a small CIL circuit to produce a doré. So we're doing the metallurgy test work right now in Lima with Laboratorio Plengi, and that's going quite well. We'll have quite a few of the results later this year on that work. Just summarizing a few things here. The initial capital I talked about on the 30,000 ton per day case in the PFS, and in year 4 you'd do another expansion to 342 million. We're looking at somewhere on the order in the 1.1, 1.2 billion initial capital with a larger 40,000 ton per day initial scenario. We're working on the engineering, so we'll see how those numbers turn out. You can see I've already talked about the NPV, but when you look at the 1980 case and 450 copper, let's say, your IRR is 23% and you have a 3.5 billion NPV. Go back here and talk about the Wheaton stream for a second. Basically that at $1,650 gold and 375 copper, that'll lower the NPV down to 2 million from 2.2, which was the base case in the PFS. What we're looking at is an upfront payment from Wheaton for 6.6% of the payable gold of 252 million. Basically, it's 48 million for the feasibility study and some early works, and the balance, the 252 million, is for construction. So overall, it's a $300 million facility. Once 700,000 ounces of gold are delivered, it gets reduced to 4.4%. And if we're taken out, it can be bought down to 4.4%. And there's a payment of 18% of spot until 300 million is recouped. And then it goes to 22% of spot comes to us after that. The PFS project details, This is the layout in the PFS. We're moving some of these things around. We're likely moving this waste rock storage facility, the green there, to the northwest or northeast of the Cangrejos pit. That'll allow us to move the process plant in closer. So we're working on all the engineering to lock these things down as we speak. Basically, what we're trying to do is optimize the footprint of the project, and by backfilling about 300 million tons of Gran Bestia waste in the Cangrejos pit after it's mined out, that'll give us a lot smaller surface footprint. So that's part of what we're looking at in the feasibility study today. We're going with dry stack tails facility. This facility is about 12 kilometers away from the pit at a lower elevation. Up at the mine, it's 2 meters of rainfall a year. Down at the dry stack tailings facility, it's roughly a meter. The technology and the cost for dry stack tails has decreased significantly over the last several years with a lot of technological improvements. So we also have area that in this design in the PFS to expand beyond the current mine plan. ESG is a cornerstone of the project. I'm not going to go into all these bullets, but basically we're doing a lot of things with the local communities. For instance, when we went in and we were drilling, we used man-portable rigs. We use all of the local labor to build trails and access and drill pads. We weren't able to get enough employees to help us out of the communities during those programs. So we had to go outside of the area of influence to bring in people. So, I think majority of the power in Ecuador, I'll just point to a few things here, is hydropower. That helps. We're close to the port facility that minimizes emission impacts and social issues. Dry stack tailings, we're going to recycle about 85% of the water. So there's a lot of things in the ESG perspective that help the project. Just looking at a timeline, there's 3 major things we need to do to get this to production. Finish the investment protection agreement. We're in negotiations with the government to do that. We actually have an exploration investment protection agreement that we're modifying now. And then we're negotiating with the government for exploitation investment protection agreement. Finish the feasibility and then do the construction permitting. We should be starting the ESIA here with the environmental impact assessment and social assessment within the next month here. So that'll take about 18 months for the construction permitting process. So we're looking at a 2.5-year build once all permitted. So that's kind of the key focus, these 3 things of the company right now. It's a unique project. So if you look at some of the peers here, Cangrejos fits in a good place. You've got Greenstone. I'm on the board of Equinox Gold. We're just commissioning that now. Cote is being built, Solaris Norte, Blackwater. So there's very few of these active projects that can produce over 250,000 ounces of gold per year. And Cangrejos is the 5th largest of these, held by a development company that's independent. The blue ones there are all majors or mid-tier producers. So you can see we show well there. One of the things that gets overlooked a lot is people focus on the lower grade nature. I mean, this is a large scale project, lower grade, so it's an efficiency operation. But the stripping ratio is really significant here. If you take the gold equivalent mine plan grade and divide it by the stripping ratio, you can see on the left, we go from the lowest grade, but when you look at it, we're up near the top after stibnite and cone. And really, this points to mining cost, and this is one of the key aspects of the project that really helps. Low diesel cost in the country affects the mining cost, the low strip. So we bode really well in that regard. And then if you look at the value disconnect, so if you go back to January 2017, we had a first resource was 4 million ounces. You move forward to today, we have some 22 million ounces all in, and our share, we've grown the resource 4-fold. Gold has gone up 93% in that time frame. Copper's up 61%. but our share price, with all of the financings we've done, our market cap has only gone up 7%. So I think with this gold price movement now, I think we're one of the best, lowest cost entries into the gold development space globally. Just in summary, since taking over the project in 2014, we've consolidated the concession land package. We've taken the project from no resource to the 26th largest in the world, regardless of category. We completed 3 economic studies, substantially de-risked the project. Our PFS was robust in 2023. We adjusted the project phasing to offset inflationary effects. We did catch the fourth quarter of 2022, so we did get a lot of inflation baked into the cost of the PFS. We converted 11.6 million ounces of gold and 1.4 billion pounds of copper to proven or to a probable mineral resource. We've proven a 26-year mine life with a $2.2 billion NPV. And we've got a team with a track record of successfully monetizing large-scale assets. We've sold 9 companies for a cumulative $1.6 billion over the years. I've been with the group with Ross 20 years now, so we're making good progress as a group. So I want to say thank you and turn it back over to you, Timothy.
Great. Thank you, Marshall, for the very informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just a reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We already do have a few questions here. I guess starting off, how is the political situation in Ecuador today?
That's a good question. I mean, there was a lot of headline news earlier in the year. Over the last several years, there's been a lot of cartel activity within Ecuador. Violence had spiked up. The cartels were fighting for territories, and they were involved in things like illegal mining and into the broader population. A lot of that was centered around Guayaquil. When President Noboa came in, he kind of went after the cartels. So what you haven't heard, you heard about all the bad things that happened. What you haven't heard is how stability has sort of come back to the country and how the government has put down a lot of that unrest and violence, and things have improved significantly. We've been able to operate in the country continuously without any issues, even during that time period. So I think all in all, over the last year, things have improved significantly in the country from a security perspective. You've also had M&A activity happening through that. Our sister company, Luminex, we merged with Adventus, and then Silver Corp came in and put an offer to take out Adventus post the merger. So, you've got activity in the country, and we feel good about where the country's headed right now. We've got elections next year. We think President Noboa, if he continues his good job, will continue, and he's been pro-mining. He came to PDAC, so we think things, all in all, hopefully it'll get better.
Great. Kind of different question here, but it mentions that you have a mining scholarship, and asked, would there be any student recipients that would be working on the project?
Yeah, what's interesting is we've had, so this is a scholarship fund that Ross and I set up. It was primarily me I went to the old Missouri School of Mines. It's MSNT, Missouri University of Science and Technology. So we put a scholarship program. Ross basically matched my investment for students. So we've had 2 students that were interns for Cangrejos that have gone on. First one graduated. The second one is graduating in in the fall semester. So I guess that'd be December. Anyway, we got these guys in as interns, got them their mining engineering degrees, and there's jobs available in Ecuador. So we'll see what happens. We've got 4 people in the program now, and a 5th one is coming. So that's been a good program. Feel good about it.
Great. Now, kind of different here as well, talking about some of the investment in the country from a different angle. Do you have any comments with regards to the Solaris Zijin mining investments that seem to be essentially blocked by the Canadian government? Is that something you're familiar with, and is it something that would affect you in any way?
No, I'm familiar with it. I mean, so copper is a critical mineral in Canada. So basically, if you look at Solaris, that's primarily a copper deposit, very small amount of byproducts beyond the copper. So that was deemed critical by the government, and that was blocked. Now, whether it continues to stay blocked or if there's any appeals potentially, I'm not sure. If you look at Cangrejos and trying to draw that comparison, we're 80% gold, 20% copper. You've seen recent Chinese acquisition of Canadian gold companies, Asino, and others recently. So we don't see that as an issue if we're potentially taken out.
Great. Now, inevitably, we have questions along these lines, but what is the exit plan, and how would you envision the timeline and structure of that?
All right. So listen, the Lumina Group, since I've been with Ross for 20 years now, we've taken on large scale assets. We've added value by drilling. We de-risk it by engineering, and we move them on to somebody that would build them. They're generally large CapEx projects. You know, $1 billion CapEx project is significant for a junior to take on. So basically, you know, in the past, all these projects we've exited, put them on to somebody else that would build them. And that's been the business plan. And Ross has come out publicly as the largest shareholder and talked about wanting to see a sale happen. So we've had a fair amount of interest in the company, particularly in this higher gold price environment. So just stay tuned and we'll see what happens.
Okay, great. And what would you say is the main thing that institutional investors do not understand about your project?
Yeah, so I mean, I think they don't have a full understanding, first of all, of Ecuador risk. There is a risk there, but I think it's viewed pretty negatively more than it should be, based on the reality, based on the investment that's happening in there, based on the fiscal and regulatory regimes that have or regime improvements that have taken place since 2014. Specific to the project, I think people get hung up on the low grade without looking at that one chart that I showed you with a low stripping ratio, low power cost, 7 cents per kilowatt hour, low diesel. All those things affect the economics of the project. So, and we've also been conservative with our mine planning, pit limiting shells at $1,100 in the PFS and NSR calculated at $1,500. This project has significant upside leverage to the gold price, and you start looking at the environment we're in. So I think those things need to be looked at more, and I think you'll see a much better view of the project if you can get your head around those things.
Okay, great. And looking forward, what most concerns you that might delay your objective of completing the feasibility study in the second quarter of next year?
Not much on the feasibility study that concerns me. We've done the majority of the long lead time field work, like infill drilling to 50-meter centers for the first 3 years of production. That was 7,800 meters, roughly the same amount for pit slope geotech for mine design. That design is going on now. Drilling for the metallurgy, that's all done. So what we've got left as far as field work is facility siting, geotech work, and then it's all engineering design. So we need to wrap up the metallurgy here in the next few months, but we've got a wealth of metallurgical work that we've done to date. So as it pertains to the feasibility study itself, I don't have a lot of concerns on schedule. I think we're in good shape right now.
Great. And one follow-up here, and referring that infill drilling, how much of the current inferred resource would you expect to upgrade into measured and indicated, and therefore, potentially include in the reserve for the feasibility study?
Yeah. So what we did is we didn't add any more infill or inferred drilling to upgrade the category from the PFS. So the PFS had the 11.6 million ounces of gold and the 1.4 billion pounds of copper in it. And that gave us in the PFS a probable reserve. The drilling we did is infill on 50-meter centers, so we could, in the feasibility study, have the early years up to a proven reserve. So that was the drilling that we did. We didn't do any expansion into inferred conversion to indicated.
Okay. And one follow-up question. You did essentially answer this, but a question: how deep did you drill? Is there any indication of higher grades at depth?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I always fought with the board and is drilling right down the pipe, down the center of the breccia zone. I wanted to drill a hole down to 1,500 meters to look at an underground sort of block cave potential, because the mineralization in the Cangrejos pit in particular, sort of in years 13 and 14 of the mine plan, were 2 grams per ton and sort of 0.5% copper. I felt that there is the potential for a block cave operation at depth, but no work has been done to prove that out. So that's just my view. So there is that potential left for somebody to go do that. But when you're you're a junior company and trying to develop a project like this and move it forward, it just kind of fell by the wayside.
Okay, great. This is an interesting one, a little more on the community relations side, but have you considered any lessons learned from Cobre Panama? Obviously there's some different things that went on there, but part of it is the public perception of mining and belief that there was pollutants and deforestation and things that may or may not have been true. But are those, I guess, thoughts about a similar project with Cangrejos?
So it was political. Okay, you had kind of a leftist populist government, which just recently changed to a center-right government in Panama. So I don't know what the story will ultimately be at the end with this new government, but basically it's pretty easy to say, hey, mining pollutes water, deforestation. Yeah, you have to remove vegetation, do vegetation suppression to open up mining areas, all that. I don't have the specifics of what happened with their local communities, but you have to have a strong social license with your local communities. I don't know if they did or they didn't, or if it was more political. So what all that bodes and tells me as far as Cangrejos goes, we got to keep our government relations up strong, and we have to do what we tell the government we're going to do. Same goes for the communities. We have to have programs for the communities. And as I mentioned in the talk, we had to bring communities from outside the area of interest to help us support moving drill rigs around and doing field work. Right now, we have a test pit and drilling program for geotech going. We've got some 100 people that will be employing from the community during that program to build trails and do the test pitting and move drill rigs. So, those things. And then you have to work with the community to really understand their needs. And, it's a mutual respect thing. You don't want to be handing everything out to the community. You understand their needs and you work with the community to achieve those, but you're not like Santa Claus, right? So it's that balance that's real critical. And you need to have that strong core support with the communities nearest you, because you'll probably in any mining project have outside anti-mining groups come after you. I think Adventus was a good example when they did the vote within the local communities at Curipamba, El Domo. They had 98% support of the project, right? And that's by building a strong local community program. And I can't say whether Cobre de Panama did that or not. I know First Quantum, they're a good operator. I'm assuming they did. But again, I think back to the original question, a lot of that was all politics.
Okay. We have a few more questions about timeline of potential sale and so on. But I guess one question I'll ask a little bit here with a little different angle. Obviously, you had mentioned Silver Corp coming into the country by acquisition. I know Gina Reinhardt's group has also come in on an earn-in agreement, I think, with a junior in the country. You've seen more big players come into the country.
Yeah, Barrick's in the country now too, with a deal they just did with Anami. Newmont's in now with their ownership of LUM.V via Newcrest. So yeah.
Great. Have you seen, obviously covered by confidentiality agreements, but have you seen an increase in interest? Have you gotten, had conversations, I guess, with any new groups that have come into the country?
Yeah, we've seen things tick up over the last 6 months in particular.
Okay, great. And one more general question, I guess, here, but knowing what you know now, is there anything you wish you had done differently over the last couple of years?
Yeah, not had COVID.
Yeah.
Or not have the COVID epidemic. I mean, that slowed us down. I mean, Ross came out in 2020 and in February, I believe it was, and mentioned that, as the largest shareholder, he would like to see the company move on to a company that would develop it. And, COVID sort of happened. Say the question one more time, because that was a little bit of a tangent. But
sure. No, I guess just what would you have done differently over the last couple of years?
I think, there isn't a lot we would have done differently. I mean, to discover something like this and move it through 3 stages of engineering in the time frame that we did, and now be at a feasibility study, it's a pretty monumental task. There's things that took longer than they should have, or we thought. The changes in the government slowed things down a bit. You can't do much to change that. Probably if I look back on it, when the equity market was stronger in the earlier days, raise more money so that we would have had funds at a lower dilution, higher equity price. But technically, I think we've done a really good job, and there's minor things you could have changed.
Sure. Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have today. I guess I'll finish off with kind of a general question here, but you'd mentioned during the presentation, but just to review, what are potentially some news items or key milestones coming up for the company in the coming months?
So we just put out a press release the other day, and that talked about changing the project initial capital build from a 30,000 ton per day to 40,000 ton per day, and then just doing 1 expansion phase instead of 2 in the PFS. That'll give us a little bit higher initial capital, but I think it'll be bode better for the project. We talked about the investment protection agreements that we're in negotiations with. We're going to start the ESIA work here in the next month or so. So it's kind of boring sort of news flow. We'll have metallurgical results. Those are the sort of things, just moving that project towards production.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to thank Marshall Koval for presenting today, and thank you everyone on the line for tuning in. Please join us tomorrow afternoon when our Red Cloud webinar series continues with Blue Sky Uranium presenting Thursday, May 23rd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.